So the last element of the Tom Loosemore definition of digital does mention technology.
Yep.
You've said it's not absent, it's there, but it is last for a reason. When it comes to the technology part, we do need leaders, I assume, to understand some aspects, and often they're being told about, you need a data strategy, you need to talk about cloud, have you heard of low code, what about cybersecurity? What is it we need leaders to actually understand about those kind of terms or those bits of tech or tech concepts in order for tech to thrive in their organisation?
Yeah, in a sense, it sounds like a rather sort of vague answer, but what we want our leaders to do is to know enough about technology, okay? And that is enough to be able to sort of execute their strategic role in all of this, really. So what we absolutely can't have our leaders doing, which perhaps has happened in the past, is where we've got people who kind of almost wear their ignorance of technology as a badge of honour and that kind of thing, and they say, oh, I don't do technology. Well, actually, that's not really good enough now. And we need people to, you don't need to be like super users, you don't need to be, really, really technical, but you do need to know that changing your technology is absolutely within your gift, and it's something that you are responsible for within your organisation if you're in one of those sort of leadership positions. I think the other thing that I would say about, you mentioned quite a few of the sort of the hot topics in local gov technology at the minute, and absolutely we need to sort of go into those in a bit of detail. But I think the other thing is that a lot of the information sometimes that comes into leaders is via the marketing departments or vendors, who will be like pushing the latest thing that they want to invest in. And I suspect that actually thinking that through, the key thing that we want our leaders to be understanding is, despite the fact they're being sort of bashed with solutions all the time, is to remember that good digital work is all about meeting the user need. And so it's, the response that, perhaps we want our leaders to be having when they're talking or hearing about technology is, well, what is the actual user need that this might help us meet? What's the problem that this is going to fix? Things like, people can talk about, cloud. Cloud is not a...
Should we all be in the cloud?
Yeah,
is, I guess, the question that often comes back to CDOs.
Yes, yeah. And that is not a strategy. That is not absolutely, cloud is a tactical response to certain problems or certain issues that councils may have. Likewise, things like automation and things like that. Again, it's not a strategy, but it's a tool that you can use to achieve certain goals and to meet certain needs. So the key thing from a leadership perspective is, when people are talking about technology, whether, it's suppliers trying to sell you things, whether it's your own technology department saying, well, we want to do X or we want to do Y, is to say, well, just ask that question. What's the user need? What's the problem that we're going to solve with this? And that then gets the conversation about technology up and out of the weeds of the technical detail and into that strategic space where leaders can really add some value.
And that chimes with, I think, Lottie's way of thinking, which is, always start with the real world outcome in mind and almost have relentless pragmatism on how you get there. So when they're in their discussions with their sort of digital teams, they've said, these are the outcomes I want. I guess, is there also a bit of sufficient awareness so their expectations of what can be done are realistic? So again, in terms of when we talk about cloud or data, or should everyone be moving to whatever low code is, do they need to understand those concepts in detail so that they're having an informed conversation, or what's the just enough in that context?
Yeah, I think, so taking those things that you mentioned, when we're talking about cloud, what we're really talking about at a very, very high level is, in effect, using other people's sort of data centers and things to store our applications and our data and sometimes, other bits of what you might call the gubbins of running the IT for an organisation.
And what's the advantages of doing that? Why pragmatically would that help?
Well, so one of the main advantages is that we're getting to a stage now of evolution in technology and in IT, where these things are effectively becoming commodities. It's like a utility, like you're running water or your gas or your electric or something like that. Do we care about how the electricity, arrives to us when we switch a plug on? No, we don't really.
You don't want your own power station on site.
Exactly right. We just don't need to think about that stuff anymore. We're more than happy just to consume it as it comes in. And likewise, there are certain IT functions that we're more than happy to start thinking about it in that way. So in other words, let's just make this somebody else's problem. And one of the reasons why we can do that is because some of those providers that we can make this their problem, that's their job. That's what they do. They do it better than anyone else. So while we're a council perhaps that's struggling with resources, hiring people with the right skills and things to be able to make all of this stuff happen, actually it's a really sensible way to assess, just how much of a commodity is this particular technology, like the hosting of applications and things like that. Actually, do we want our people to spend all their time tinkering with servers and all of this kind of stuff? Maybe that's not the best use of their time. So actually, if we can make use of a cloud provider to look after all of that gubbins for us, it makes really good business sense.
So thinking carefully about where that might have merit. The other conversation that seems to come up a lot is we've got all these legacy technologies from big suppliers. Some want to sort of develop technology in-house, others want to use low code where you can sort of repurpose freely, tools that you can repurpose for whatever your need might be. Do they need to get into the weeds of what strategically is the right decision for those, or do you leave that to the digital team?
I think some understanding, again, is quite useful here. And again, I would think about it in terms of, if you like, that value chain. So in other words, where is the effort and the thinking going to have the most benefit? So again, thinking about this in terms of, what is a more commoditized kind of service and things like that. If we're thinking about systems in that sense, yes, absolutely. Local government software has a bit of a deserved reputation, I think, for being a little bit on the crusty side. And some of those big line of business systems, whether it's your Revs and Bends system or it's your adult social care case management system or whatever it might be, there are relatively few suppliers. The level of innovation in the market perhaps isn't as great as we'd like to see. And an awful lot of time and effort could be spent agonizing over that, and thinking about, well, actually, should we be making use of our technology resources to, like you say, build our own one of those things. The key thing for, I think, for a leader to understand when that sort of thing is being discussed is thinking about where does the value actually get added. The huge amount of effort that would have to go into doing something like that, would that be better spent on other projects?
And can you sustain it?
And can you sustain it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, because once you've built this thing, you're going to have to maintain it, you're going to have to support it and all the rest of it. My gut tells me that that's probably not the best use of everybody's time right now. That actually the gains that you would get from doing that work probably for a single organisation, for a single council, probably aren't going to sort of really benefit you that much. Instead, I think we need to accept the fact that we have these sort of big sort of legacy systems, if you like, that they have a role to play, and they, generally speaking, do them reasonably well. That we've got used to it over the years, and it's absolutely fine. But then nonetheless, when we look at that value chain, there are things where we can intervene and spend some time and some money and effort improving experiences for people. And that, generally speaking, I would say, is kind of like on the front end, if you like. So, where can we put in place interfaces and things that our residents might be using and other service users, so that actually they make more use of online service. They're better able to help themselves. They achieve those outcomes that they're looking for in a much quicker, less painful, less depressing way than perhaps might otherwise have been the case. So in other words, invest in technology and invest effort in where you can actually create the most value. And I think that's the space at which leaders really need to be thinking around this stuff.